I love coming to the Philippines. Some of my most precious friends are here. I don't say that just to make everybody feel good, but it is the truth. I really enjoy coming here. There's no nation on earth that gives you better hospitality than the Filipinos. I don't know where you all get your smile from, but keep it up. Because when you get off the plane and see those smiles and all the courtesy, it's good, because not everywhere do you have that degree of comfort. So Peter, thank you for having me. Always good to be with you. You know, we often think and have this idea that we are living in the toughest times, that things have never been so bad, that we've never seen such hopelessness. And to be honest with you, sometimes I get into that frame of mind too. I've lived in the West since I was 20 years old. I'm now 73. So the first 20 years of my life I spent growing up in India, born in the southern city of Chennai, raised in the northern city of Delhi. And at the age of 20, my father migrated the family to Toronto, in Toronto 10 years, and then after that in the US. And I've often come to the conclusion that as I watch what's happening there politically, I have never seen it like this. I have never seen such toxicity. The world has so many great needs and issues confronting us. And what are we doing as political leaders in the United States? We are just kicking each other to death in the process. You know, they tell you how donkeys fight and how horses fight. When donkeys fight, they form a circle and they face the enemy and they kick each other to death. When horses fight, they form a circle. They face each other and kick the enemy in the opposite direction. In the West, we have become masters at fighting like donkeys. We just face in the opposite direction and kick each other to death. But look at any part of the world. England struggling with the issue of Brexit. United States right now struggling with the issue of impeachment. India is struggling with making laws where young people are walking into universities and beating up other university students, or creating all kinds of havoc and threatening all kinds of violence in the process. You go to almost any part of the world and you see unease. I'm sure you have your own battles here as well. There's always this restlessness in the heart. But the amazing thing to me across history, when you see these things happening and you're caught in that quicksand or that quagmire and you're being dragged down, then you look back and you realize how God suddenly raised up an individual or raised up a group of people and began to do His work in ways totally unexpected. Never underestimate the value of an individual. Never underestimate the value of an individual. You know, recently that unfortunate incident of a plane that was shot down in Iran, that Ukrainian airliner. There were many Canadians on board in that flight. And a Canadian journalist wrote an article about all the potential that was lost in that shooting down of the aircraft. Brilliant young technological minds. Some of Canada's finest professors were on that plane and they were shot down. And I say that to say this: the journalist bemoaned the destruction of what was so densely potential, that could have become actual. But a mistake cut those lives down. And as I read that and put the paper down, the thought came to my mind, and that thought was this: why do you not think the same way about the abortion issue? Millions potential that could have been actualized, and so much has been eliminated in the name of technology and progress and choice and so on. And so, ladies and gentlemen, we cannot control everything. We cannot control the accidents and what happens in the shooting down of those airliners. But one of the things you really can control is to ask the question, what does God have you to do as an individual? Don't underestimate what you can do and what your words can accomplish and what your activity for God can actually bring about and make changes. And the darkness was there. I was about to read for you a description of what Rome was like. And the whole issue of Rome was even worse than ours. One of the paragraphs says something like this out here. It says, it would be unsavory to describe how far the worship of indecency was carried in Rome, how public morals were corrupted by the mimic representations of everything that was vile and even pandering to an art that had become corrupt. The personation of gods, divination, astrology, magic, all contributed to the general decay. It has been rightly said that the idea of a conscience as we understand it had been destroyed by heathenism. Absolute right did not exist. Might was right. The social relations exhibited, if possible, even deeper corruption. The sanctity of marriage had ceased and almost moving to an entire cessation of marriage. Abortion and the exposure of the newly born children were common and tolerated. Unnatural vices, which even the greatest philosophers practiced, if not advocated, attained proportions which defied description. This is 2,000 years ago. And the historian of recent times, Alfred Edersheim, writes this in the book, Life and Times of Jesus the Messiah. And so, in the early church, these great cultures, the Roman culture, the Greek culture, the Babylonian culture had all had their sway. And the Jewish culture with its bright minds into this mix of worldviews and transcendent visions or immanent visions of reality comes the gospel of Jesus Christ, the babe born in the manger. The hopes and fears of all the years had come in that tiny little life so that thinkers travel for miles to come to meet him. And they're all of a sudden listening to this voice, and he takes Isaiah 61 and reads it when his first entry into that sacred place, and he says, today these scriptures are fulfilled in your ears, and he closed the book. And so what happened was a handful of men and women, outnumbered immeasurably, changed the known world of their time, so that today more knees bend at the name of Jesus than at the name of anyone else. The disproportion of the disciples to the population at large and the culture at large was enormous, a huge gap. How did these men and women accomplish it? How did they get it done? And they start pointing to individuals like Saul of Tarsus and others. I want to point out to you one man who made a speech while he was dying. And may I suggest to you that speech may have been one of the hinges of what changed history. And I would like to read that for you from Acts chapter 7. And reading from verse 44. Our fathers had the tabernacle of the testimony with them in the desert. This is Stephen speaking. It had been made as God directed Moses according to the pattern he had seen. Having received the tabernacle, our fathers under Joshua brought it with them when they took the land from the nations God drove out before them. It remained in the land until the time of David, who enjoyed God's favor and asked that he might provide a dwelling place for the God of Jacob. But it was Solomon who built the house for him. However, The Most High does not live in houses made by men, as the prophet says. Heaven is my throne, and the earth is my footstool. What kind of house will you build for me, says the Lord, or where will my resting place be? Has not my hand made all these things? You stiff-necked people with uncircumcised hearts and ears, you are just like your fathers. You always resist the Holy Spirit. Was there ever a prophet your fathers did not persecute? They even killed those who predicted the coming of the righteous one. And now you have betrayed and murdered him. You who received the law that was put into effect through angels, but have not obeyed it. When they heard this, they were furious and gnashed their teeth at him. But Stephen, full of the Holy Spirit, looked up to heaven and saw the glory of God, and Jesus standing at the right hand of God. Look, he said, I see heaven open and the Son of Man standing at the right hand of God. At this, they covered their ears, and yelling at the top of their voices, they all rushed at him, dragged him out of the city, and began to stone him. Meanwhile, the witnesses laid their clothes at the feet of a young man named Saul. While they were stoning him, Stephen prayed, Lord Jesus, receive my spirit. Then he fell on his knees and cried out, Lord, do not hold this sin against them. When he had said this, he fell asleep. And there's the hinge of history in the first verse of the next chapter. And Saul was there giving approval to his death. Think of that. The first martyr is giving a long historical speech. I just read a few verses of it. He's gone through all of their history. He's connected all the dots. But Stephen himself didn't know what the next dot was going to be. That was the man who was giving consent to his death, Saul of Tarsus. And Jesus had in mind that man to change the known world of the time. Incredible. The hinges of history. Saul was guarding the clothes of those who were murdering this man. Even Saul had no idea he was going to write for us nearly 25% of the New Testament. Don't underestimate a life. Don't underestimate what God can do to you, in you, and through you. But I want to look at a few issues this morning in terms of what it is that undergirded them, what it is that motivated them. And let me tell you something, it had nothing to do with life preservation or riches. It had nothing to do with finding a career. It had nothing to do with finding a job or a happy home life. These men and women were willing to give up everything. And you and I sit here today listening to this. And this was penned to us by Luke, who was the companion to Paul. The dotted lines are fantastic. You never know until you look back in the sunset years of your life what a design God had for you, what a design God had for the church. And I think it was Will Durant, the historian, who made this comment. There is no greater drama in human record than the sight of a few Christians scorned or oppressed by a succession of emperors, bearing all trials with a fierce tenacity, multiplying quietly, but building order while the enemies generated chaos, fighting the sword with the word of God, brutality with hope, and at last defeating the strongest state that history had ever known. Caesar and Christ had met in the arena, and Christ had won. This is Will Durant, the historian. Caesar and Christ met in the arena, and Christ had won. How did that great empire ultimately come collapsing down? And the Word of God, through people like Paul and then Augustine and the rest of them, moved to change the world. I want to give you two things that undergirded them right from the beginning. It was the reality of a conviction of truth and unmitigated love. Truth and love undergirded these people. And this truth is this: convictions ungirded by love. Hear me now. Convictions ungirded by love will make the possessor of those convictions obnoxious, and the dogma he or she possesses will become repulsive. If your convictions are not sustained and supported by love, it will make your message repulsive and you yourself unattractive to the person you're trying to win. So it has to be convictions undergirded by love. If they are ungirded by love, the dogma is rejected and the person is certainly not appreciated or exalted. So, what were these convictions? My message is titled Convictions That Conquered the World. The first one is this: they saw the finger of God in all of history and Christ as its central figure. They saw the finger of God in all of history and Christ as its central figure. You know, there are many chapters in the Bible that have long historical backdrops, long historical narratives. When they come over from Egypt into the Promised Land, you've got Joshua giving them this long speech about how all of this had happened. After their enslavement, when they return, you've got Ezra recounting all the details of how all this had happened and that they had reached this point. Here in Acts 7, at the birth of the church, you've got Stephen on the verge of being stoned to death, who goes through the whole backdrop of history. History is ultimately his story, and your heart and mine is the minor context in which that story is unfolded. Someone else made this comment: history is actually a compilation of innumerable biographies. History is actually a compilation of innumerable biographies. Our stories are locked into history, one person at a time. And for Stephen, he said to them, "You are about to kill me. You stoned the prophets. You killed them. You even killed the Holy One that God had sent. And now you're thinking of killing me." But he points out to them that the one you had killed was the one who had come to redeem and transform and save. This idea that the finger of God is in all of history and Christ is the central figure is critical in our times. See, we elect our leaders, we appoint our governments, we do all of this, and years come and go and people get disgusted with one and then they elect another. And the whole scenario keeps turning topsy-turvy, upside down. Every few years, the world gets into some new mess, and there are some new leaders who cause that mess. Years ago, they used to introduce me somewhere they had one line that said, "Ravi has some great influence on some world leaders." I said, "Please take that line out. First of all, it's not true. Number two, I don't want to take the blame for everything that is happening out there." Who wants to take the blame for being an influence on all the things that are happening out there? The fact of the matter is, to the early disciples, it's this: Jesus was the interpretive figure of all of history. They waited and waited and waited, and at an appointed time when he came, He is the hermeneutical principle, the interpretive principle, the point of reference to everything that transpires. Let me give you at least one reason why that is so. Existentialism. What is existentialism? It's a big word. Can I give you 2 or 3 lines just to try and make it simpler? Existentialism basically believes something like this. It's not who you are that should define what you do. What you do should define who you are. Existence precedes essence. What you do defines essentially who you are. The biblical teaching is not existential. It has existential implications, but it's an essential definition. Who you are essentially should define what you do. Who you are precedes what you do. That's why we are called human beings. We are not called human doings. Human beings do, but the being precedes the doing. And so what did the existentialists say? By your will, lift yourself up by your own bootstraps and make your choices. Or some of them will talk about it as the power of now. Do it now. Will to choose. Existence precedes essence. So the existentialist basically is driven by the now, by the moment. The traditionalist deals with the past. The Hebrew culture was a traditional culture. Have you ever seen the play Fiddler on the Roof? You hear the song? Tradition, tradition, tradition. Tradition, tradition, tradition. So for the traditionalist, it was the past. For the existentialist, it is the now. For the utopianist, which is Marxist, it's futuristic. Pie in the sky, by and by when I die. Kill 60 million now if you have to. We are moving towards that utopia. Existentialism now. Traditionalism in the past. Utopianism in the future. Jesus took the bread and broke it. Said, as often as you eat of this bread and drink of this cup, now you proclaim the Lord's death in the past until he come in the future. He took bread and broke it for the now, harking back to the past until he come in the future. For Jesus, all of time is important, not just the now, not just the past, not just the future. He is Lord of all of history. He is the Lord of all of time. I had no choice on the ethnicity of my birth. God made that choice. I remember saying to my mother and father, because my mom was actually engaged to another man, and he was from another faith. And they didn't even tell my mother, when the date came for her to be married, that there was no marriage. And so it was my culture. And so my mom went to her mother and said, I thought I was supposed to be getting married today. Nothing has happened. And she said, we meant to tell you, your fiance was killed in a heat stroke, long time back. He was riding in a bullock cart somewhere, smitten by the heat, and he was gone. And so there's no wedding. So I looked at my mom, I said, so you're telling me there was a possibility that I would never have existed? That's really what you're telling me, right? She said, you're right. I said, if I had married the original man I met, you would never have been. Think of that. Your DNA, your birth, is a sovereign act of God on your life. You are here at this moment, by divine causality for a divine purpose, find it and realize you are a part of history and you can make a difference. And you know what? The disciples couldn't figure this all out. They couldn't figure this all out. So Jesus is crucified and the disciples are shocked. They say, we had hoped he would deliver us, that all of this would happen. So the women go to the garden and they've figured it out now what has happened. But two of the disciples are walking on the Emmaus road, and once again it is Luke who's telling us the story. That these two boys are walking on the Emmaus road and a stranger comes and joins them. And he looks at them and he says, what are you boys so upset about? And they look at him and make the most ironic statement they could have ever made. They said to him, are you the only one in Israel who doesn't know what's happened? The truth of the matter is he was the only one in Israel who did know what had happened. So he is beginning to do what? Give them the longest history lesson they had ever heard. He takes it beyond Stephen, connects all the dots for them. They are so overwhelmed, they invite him for dinner. They say, would you come in and have dinner with us? We'll pay for your dinner. So Jesus goes in to have dinner with them. He is continuing his speech because they want to hear more to explain. But then he did something that totally befuddled them and stunned them. He took a piece of bread and he broke it. The moment they saw him do that, they knew who he was. And he disappeared from their midst. Not the existentialist, not the traditionalist, not the utopianist, but as often as you eat of this bread and drink of this cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he returned. They knew he had died and had risen again from the dead. And they were running back to tell everybody, to give them the good news. They had already been told what exactly is really happening. Ladies and gentlemen, God is the God over all of time. Don't look down upon this time. This is your time to understand his timing. This is your time to understand his timing. You know, last year I stepped down from the leadership of the organization that I had led for all these years. I've been in the ministry now for 48 years. My work may not be finished, but it's done. I think I've preached enough, I've spoken enough, there's nothing new I can say. I've just done it all that I wanted to do, but I recognized it was time to pass the baton on to younger legs and a younger mind. And many of my team members are here, and they're all actually coming in for a leadership meeting for the next 2 or 3 days here. And I said to them, you know what? I'll run, but I have run like a rabbit. I have broken the force of the wind for so long. Now it's one of you to go ahead and take the full force of the wind. Most important time in a person's life is know when to hand over the baton to faster legs and keener minds and greater visionaries. Your time goes and you move off the scene. No, I'm not finished, but I'm done. I will keep running as long as God gives me breath in this body. And I'll tell you what, young people, those days fly by like the wind, and you suddenly look back and say, where have all the years gone? Redeem the time, harness the time. 70 years and 10 is not much at all. When you've reached that destination point, you say, I thought I was young, but my knees tell me I am not. take the time that God has given to you, the finger of God in all of history, and Christ as its central figure. That's the first truth that kept them going. But secondly, it is how they harnessed an arena of persecution into a platform of opportunity. How they harnessed an arena of persecution into a platform of opportunity. Don't be afraid of persecution. Don't be afraid of opposition. I've had a handful of people in my life who can't stand the sight of me, and they really like to go after me. And I have a very good friend in Egypt. His name is Maher. He's a brilliant guy, a veteran psychiatrist. He heads up our Middle Eastern team. And he looked at me across the table one day and he said, "My brother, why are you so surprised? Why are you so surprised? I am surprised that they have not been hitting you earlier, because you are dismantling their structures." Said, "You are an apologist. Why are you surprised? The winds will always be there. The moment you want to build something for God, you can be sure there will somebody who will want to take it down. You can be sure. It happened to our Lord, it happened to Paul, it happened to the early disciples, and even God looked at Peter and he said, "You know what, Peter? When you were young, you went wherever you wanted to go. When you get old, you will go to places you do not want to go." Peter did not realize Jesus was talking about the manner of death. He was going to die. Don't be afraid of persecution. Be surprised if you don't have persecution. When you are doing something for the glory of God, the enemy will try to sift you. The greater your potential, the greater he will try to break you, to discourage you. He is the doubter. He is the accuser. He is the discourager. Don't ever lose heart. When I had a strong back, I used to be a runner. I tried my best at sprinting. I didn't have the hips to move as fast, so I became a long-distance runner. And when you're running long distances, the most difficult part of the race is when you're at the halfway point. You've given it your best. You're needing that oxygen. And I remember one year in Sydney, Australia. I always get up early in the morning, and this was about 5:30 or 6, I think it was there in the morning, and I stepped out of my hotel to go across. In those days, we used to go across to these computer cafes so we could plug the computer in and write. So I'd taken my computer, and all of a sudden I saw yellow tape and police officers barricading that whole road. I said, "I'm trying to get across there." He said, "You can't right now." I said, "Why not?" He said, "Just move back, just move back." So I moved back, and all of a sudden I heard the pounding of feet, heavy pounding of feet. And I saw this Kenyan athlete coming down the road. It was a Sydney marathon going on. That guy was running like a horse. It was about the 18-mile mark. I couldn't have run the first mile at that speed. Galloping across, steady, rhythmic breathing, body without an ounce of fat, just like mine, running across the road there. Tremendous. And I watched him. I said, "How on earth do you become a runner like this?" You know how they become runners like that in Kenya? Not running on flat roads, not running on police barricaded. It's up the hills and down the hills and into the valleys and all through the ragged, till that body knows how to handle even the steep climb, and the rest of the guys are so far away. This guy is running like the whole thing is a piece of cake. Run for God. Train for God. Study when you have the opportunity. Memorize the scriptures. Regurgitate the scriptures. Discipline the soul for the long distance. Don't give up at the halfway point. Keep running. Keep running. And you will breast the tape. And they saw that this whole idea of persecution and all the challenge that persecution was bringing to them, they took it and leveraged it into a platform of opportunity. They leveraged it into a platform of opportunity. You know, by God's grace, I've actually led a very healthy life. As I told you before, I don't know when I last had a cold and a cough. I cannot remember. I don't think I've ever had the flu. I just keep going. And my mother used to say, I know why you're like this. It's because of all the junk food you ate on the side of the road when you were a kid. All the bugs gave up on trying to win you over. But I have had two great weaknesses: a broken back and a weak voice. When I was in my 20s studying, a doctor looked into my vocal cords and he said, your vocal cords are not designed for professional use. You better give up the idea of becoming a speaker. So next day I went to school and I was walking around, and the president of the institution, Dr. Stuart Beamer, he said, Ravi, I'm not used to looking at you so downcast. What's the problem? I said, sir, I had some bad news. He said, really? He said, come on up to my office. I said, the bad news is I've been told my vocal cords are not made for professional use. I'm not to think of ever becoming a speaker. He said, who told you that? I said, well, I went to see some doctor on this matter. He said, I don't believe it. So I don't believe it. He said, I'm going to send you to the best ENT man in the country. Go and see him. It's a long story. You know what? I came this close to changing my calling. But then you find out this, and I want you to hear me. A job is something you choose. A calling is something for which you are chosen. A job is something for which you choose. A calling is something for which you are chosen. Let me give you an example. We have 5 grandchildren. I love them, but they exhaust me. By the end of the day, I've put out more energy than in preaching 5 sermons. And I'll tell you what happened. Our oldest is Jude. He's a philosopher. He'll talk philosophy with you. But Jude was running around our house one day. He was about 5 at that time, tearing around the corner, yelling at the top of his lungs, pretending he was in a war or something. And I just watched him. I said, what kind of vitamins does this guy have, you know? So he's running around the corner, and as he's taking one corner, he stubs his toe. And he falls, and he is screaming blue murder. So I picked him up. I said, you know, Jude, you don't run like that. You were running like crazy around the house. So my wife came, picked him up, put him on the counter, and started kissing his toes. I said, boy, I feel really good now. I'm giving him a lecture. She's giving him love. And they call me the apologist. I watched what she did, and you know what she did? She was doing her calling. She was Nana, his grandmother. She was a mother. A calling is something for which you are chosen. It's a natural thing when you are chosen. I was raised for dialogue and speaking. My wife was raised for loving and nurturing, and she does a marvelous job at doing just that. No calling is superior to the other. Let every person abide in the calling wherein they are called. God has placed you where He has placed you by design. There are only two kinds of calling: sacred and profane, not sacred and secular. You're not in secular work. Nobody, no Christian is in secular work. Secular means this worldly. Seculum, God is locked out. If you're an engineer, your calling is a sacred calling. If you're building roads, your calling is a sacred calling. If you're a doctor, your calling is a sacred calling. I'm a preacher, my calling is a sacred calling. So I say, face the persecution wherever you are and take that as a platform of opportunity to be a witness for Christ. That is what God calls us to do. Years ago in the 80s, I was speaking in the city of Jingalov in Poland, the south of Poland, just by the border of the Czech Republic. And the banner behind me as I was speaking wrote this: Christusem inače, Christusem inače. So I asked my inviting pastor, he's actually a doctor, I said, Henrik, what does that mean? He said, it's very hard to translate it, but it's like this. It means, but Christ. But Christ. It's the completion of a thought without the full thought being given there. And what we are telling the Polish people is, we have suffered a lot, but Christ. We have been persecuted, but Christ. We have been dominated and made subservient, but Christ. We don't have much wealth in this country, but Christ. Take all the adverse situations and end it with the two words, but Christ. But Christ is able to take. None of you who has come through a winding path has come through that winding path by accident, because your path can be ended with the same words, but Christ. But Christ. My daughter Naomi works with the broken people of this world. And if you want to see Naomi at her best, see her with the broken people of this world. Prostitutes, orphans, burn victims. She goes all over the globe. She even went into Pakistan and put on a hijab and drove for hours through the night to go to places to rescue people. And she says, Dad, when I see the scars and the wounds, my greatest temptation is to kiss those scars and tell them, those scars are the marks of God upon your life, that He has protected you. But Christ, don't look at the scars. Look at the one who's willing to kiss those scars for you and protect you and make you the person He intended you to be. Christusem inače, but Christ. But Christ. They harnessed an arena of persecution into a platform of opportunity. Every one of you has a platform. Every one of you has a platform. I can't get there, but He's placed you there. Peter can't get there, but He's placed you there. Billy Graham can't get there, but He's placed you there. He's given you a platform because you are you. That's whom He has called. And so, the finger of God in all of history, the harnessing of arena into persecution of opportunity. And lastly, very clearly, He says how the priority of a person over methodology. Methods are important. They're really important. But methods are not ends in themselves. Methods are just means. You can teach two people the same method and one may flounder, the other will succeed. It's the person. What do I mean by that? Joseph. Why didn't Joseph write a book like 50 typical dreams and how to interpret them? It would have been a bestseller. Why didn't Moses open his own bush university? Just have a bush burning there the whole time and you can go and talk to it. Jonah, exclusive photographs from the inside of a whale and how to use them in evangelistic meetings. Didn't do that. Samson, autographing jawbones everywhere that he went. Why didn't he do that? David issuing slings to his whole army. Wasn't the sling, it was David. Wasn't the dream, it was Joseph. Wasn't just the burning bush, it was the burning bush that God brought for Moses. So whatever he's done in your life, it is to remind you the individual is prior to the method. You see, some people think they can go and take a training and then become an effective communicator. The fact of the matter is, God has already made the effective communicator. He or she has to go to take the training to be sharpened in the gift that God has already given. We think training equals a gift. Not so. The gift is prior to the training. And whatever gift He has given you, the gift of amazing grace to touch this world. I could bring this to a close, and I will. I've told you my mother-in-law is 100 years old and probably not far from death. To be honest with you, every morning I wake up and the first message I look to see if my wife has written, because my mother-in-law made me promise I would preach at her funeral. So when that moment comes, wherever I am, I will honor that promise and I will return. But I sat down and talked with her. I said to her, you know, Mom, I want to tell you something. There are a lot of things you did that I didn't like. I have to be honest with you. I said, Christmas time comes, and it's the one time I want to be with the family. I travel all year. I said, and you'd go and invite some strange person whom I'd never met, and then you would be all getting the dinner ready and you'd leave me to entertain this person. I said, I want a break, but you'd give me all this work. I want a break. And one year she invited a guy called Lionel. That guy made it a miserable Christmas for me. He wanted to talk about Calvinism and Arminianism while my mother-in-law and all were cooking dinner. I said, this is Christmas time. The Son of God has come. What do you want a theological battle for? I listened to you and I want to ask you a few questions. And he went on and on and on. Lionel did. I knew nothing about Lionel. I just thought he was strange. And we finished. And then the evening came to an end. I'm not making up this story. This is true. And my sister-in-law, Margie's sister, was expecting a baby, and she went into labor that night. So the rest of them are in the hospital for the birth of this baby. Some are cooking in the kitchen. It's Lionel and me discussing Calvin and Wesley, you know. So at the end of it, many of them had come back. It was a beautiful wintry, snowy night in Toronto, truly a white Christmas. And I opened the door to let Lionel out. It was about 11:30 at night. He looked at me, I'm not making this up. He said, thank you for the best Christmas I've ever had in my life. Thank you for the best Christmas I've ever had in my life. So after he left, I said, who is this guy? What do we know about him? And Margie's mom said, he lives alone. He comes to church, sits in a corner. At the end of the service, we never see him. He leaves. He doesn't talk to anybody. I figured he was a loner. I wanted to give him a family at Christmas time. So I said, Mom, there are many things you did that I didn't like, but all the things you did, you did for the glory of God, and you always looked to the person who needed a home, and you provided that home at these times. And I held her hand and thanked her for the mother she had been to many who didn't even know who she actually was. Ladies and gentlemen, you have a calling. You know it. He's given you a platform. You are there. Fulfill it and serve God. That His finger is in all of history. You can harness an arena of persecution and change it into a platform of opportunity, and know the priority of yourself as an individual over methodology. You are an individual, which literally means in Latin, you are indivisible. You are a component and a composite. You have been fashioned by God. Those three convictions changed the world. Don't lose heart. Let us do what God wants us to do. Will you pray with me? I'm not going to make this long, but I believe God has moved in our midst today, and God has spoken to you as He's spoken to me. And maybe today you're saying, Ravi, I was beginning to lose heart. I was beginning to wonder what my low role in life really is. I'm going to make it my prayer today, first of all, that I will know Him. And secondly, that I will know what my calling is and serve Him. I don't want you to look around. This is a specific question for you to know Him and to know and answer your call. If God has spoken to you, you stand where you are. I would like to pray for you. Don't do it because somebody else is doing it. Do it because God has spoken to you and you want to make that commitment. As God bless you as I see you standing where you are. I want to know God, and I want to know my calling, and I want to honor that calling wherever He has placed me and do it to the glory of God. Those of you who know me know I don't do these things often because oftentimes I'm a guest. I'm not quite sure what's right and what's not right. But some of you sitting are still struggling. You may be still struggling with the first one. I don't know God. I need to know Him. Stand where you are seated right now. God bless you. It's wonderful to see so many of you rising to your feet. Can I make the plea one more time? If you are struggling, surrender and just say, Lord, let me stand. I need to get this done right now. There you go. There you go. God bless you. The hymn writer says, "Oh, to be like Thee, blessed Redeemer, this is my constant longing and prayer. Gladly I'll forfeit all of earth's pleasures, Jesus, Thy perfect likeness to bear. Oh, to be like Thee, oh, to be like Thee, blessed Redeemer, pure as Thou art. Come in Thy meekness, come in Thy fullness, stamp Thine own image deep in my heart." I will leave either the pastor or the one leading the meetings to tell you how you can follow up on this. But I just leave with you one line. Get into God's Word. Make that your priority every day. And I can assure you, He will speak to you and guide you and be part of this fellowship where you're worshiping and be a valuable member of the fellowship. Let me pray for you now, especially for those of you who are standing. Father, this is a divine moment. This is your appointment. This is your doing. I look at these men and women on their feet. They are rising to their feet. Lord, I pray to say to you, reach down and touch me, Father. Will you please do that? And if there's anyone still struggling, even on the way home or as they get home, let them get on their knees and deal with that which you want them to deal with. Have mercy upon each one. In the name of Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. Amen. God be with you.